this now. So what keeps middle-class South Africans awake at night? A new survey reveals that crime and corruption are depriving the middle class of sleep. Other respondents to the survey say COVID-19 keeps them awake. The survey has also revealed that some wouldn't mind leaving the country. However, despite the trauma and lack of and a lot of stress, and the majority of middle-income South Africans are happy. The survey was conducted by data company BrandMap, which sampled about 30,000 South Africans to profile the 12 million adults who live in mid to top income households, earning in excess of 10,000 rand per month. Let's discuss then the findings. I'm joined by Brandon de Kock, who is director at BrandMap. Brandon, thank you for your time. So let's start with the bad news. I don't think I will go into, I suppose we can start with the methodology. The sample size is formidable. 30,000 South Africans who fit the bill for middle to upper income, above 10,000 rand being your threshold. How did you do the survey exactly?
Hi there, Chisholm. Thanks for having me. We do it online. It's why we can only claim to represent a certain portion of South African society. So we couldn't come close to claiming to be representative of South Africa. Being an online survey, it means that over the last 10 years we've developed ways of getting people to take surveys, and it means that we can almost jump over the security fence. Is one way of looking at it. It's hard to get middle income and high income South Africans to take surveys. But we've been doing this for quite a long time. So the main answer to your question is we do it 100% online. We incentivize people with prizes. We obviously can't pay people to take the survey. So it's a reasonably random sample of wealthy South Africa. That's what we're aiming for.
So let's talk then about the findings. Let's start with the question of whether or not, a person is optimistic or pessimistic about South Africa. The findings you made there are quite concerning, are they not? About 40% of people are, less than 40% actually, are optimistic about the country.
Yeah, so I think it just, there's a bit of a misnomer in some ways that lockdown and COVID caused a whole lot of problems, but we live in a very traumatic place in the world. Our country has a lot of problems, and it had a lot of challenges and problems well before COVID or anything happened. So we've been measuring this idea of optimism for quite a long time, and this group of people we're talking about, 12 million people, it's a lot of South Africans, and it's 100% of the tax-paying base. So they're kind of important people. We want to keep these people happy. We want to keep them motivated about staying in the country, continuing to work, continuing to create job opportunities underneath them. So you'd hope that the levels of optimism were relatively high. And unfortunately, we sort of see almost the opposite. Very few of these people that we survey, somewhere in the region of I think it's 30% on the nose, are either optimistic or very optimistic about the future of South Africa. The vast majority, around 40% of people, just say, I'm unsure. They just don't know. And that kind of speaks to a lot of what's going on in our country, I think, is that most of the time we just don't know what's going to happen next. And when things do change, they can change very suddenly, which is what we've just experienced. So in general, it's just a pity that we don't have a reason to be much more optimistic right now. I think that's the lesson to be learned.
Yeah, and in fact, from the data that you provided, I see that the people who were saying they are unsure about the future of the country actually went from 40% last year to 42%, so a 2 percentage point gain there. And also you're seeing a 2 percentage point drop in the number of people who were saying last year they were optimistic. They were 25% to 23% from last year to this year. But at the same time, you also looked at the question of, how many people would consider leaving the country and would welcome the opportunity to leave South Africa. What did you find with regard to that particular measure?
So again, I think that is a direct bearing on a number of things. First of all, as you mentioned, crime and corruption are the things that are, and low economic potential are the things that really worry this group of South Africans. They are generally speaking, very well educated. They are highly employed, and they're earning reasonable amount of money to be able to make choices in life. So the fact that they're so worried about economic growth and about crime and corruption means that when you ask a question like we did, and the question is simply, how likely are you to emigrate in the next 5 years, i.e. leave South Africa and go and live in another country? So it's a broad question, and it doesn't necessarily speak to whether or not they can, because it's quite hard to leave, but it definitely speaks more to a general an appetite. And I think it's quite radical that when we ask that question of this group of people, about 30%, I think it's close on 27% said likely or very likely, and about another 24% said I'm unsure. So when you add those two together, unsure just means I haven't had a good enough reason yet, or the opportunity hasn't come along yet. But what it speaks to, though, is just this massive group of people who we desperately cannot afford to leave this country. If those people leave the country, it's half of our tax base gets eradicated. And I can give you one little insight, one further insight is that if the real issue that sits here is the age issue, because when I put an age filter onto that, the number of people under the age of 25 who have university degrees, who tick that box to say likely or very likely, goes up to closer to 50%. So can you imagine if half of the bright young people that we need to take our country forward leave this country? And they'll do it if they're given half a chance. I think it's a radical, it's not so much a concern, again, because we don't know whether they can actually leave the country. The fact that they show the appetite to it should really worry the heck out of all of us,
Yeah, thank you for that, Brendan de Kock from BrandMap there. Food for thought, really, for policymakers and various leaders of society. We didn't get to the other insight that I was hoping we'd get to. Completely ran out of time. It had to do with resilience, though, and that's the positive out of this, that in general, though, despite all of what Brendan told us, South Africans continue to be resilient, with many people saying that they are either okay or they're actually quite happy right now. So that's the other side that says, taking everything into consideration, I'm still happy, I'm still okay. We are a resilient people. Hopefully we continue to tap into that as we build this country.